What if the answer you've been chasing all along is found in the quiet moments you keep avoiding? We live in a world that demands noise. Everyone's speaking, posting, reacting. Every second is filled with the pressure to respond, to be heard, to keep up. But in all that noise, how often do you feel truly understood? How often do you feel peace? The truth is, most people are drowning in the sound of everything and everyone else. They're overstimulated, overwhelmed, and disconnected from their own inner voice. Silence, once a natural part of life, has become rare, even frightening. But maybe that's because silence is powerful, and somewhere deep down you know it. Silence isn't emptiness, it's space, it's clarity. It's where the real answers live, it's where your mind can breathe. In the stillness there are no masks, no performance, just you, your thoughts, your fears, your truth. And that can be uncomfortable, but it's also where growth begins. Because when everything goes quiet, that's when you start to hear what actually matters. That's when you feel your intuition. That's when you find direction, not from outside opinions, but from within. You don't need to force your place in the world. You don't need to prove your worth through noise. You are allowed to be quiet. You are allowed to pause. You are allowed to step back and let life unfold without constant commentary. Because silence is not retreat. It's preparation. It's alignment. It's choosing to listen before you speak. To observe before you react. To know yourself before you show yourself to the world. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. There's power in not needing to be the loudest in the room. There's power in not explaining yourself to people who will never try to understand. There's power in not responding to every challenge, every judgment, every misunderstanding. The strongest people aren't the ones shouting the loudest. They're the ones who know when to say nothing and let everything speak for itself. Stay silent, and you begin to feel your energy shifting. Your focus sharpens, your emotions settle. You stop trying to control everything and start allowing life to move through you. You begin to notice what's truly important. You start attracting clarity, peace, and confidence, not because you demanded them, but because you made space for them. If you've been feeling lost, drained, or disconnected, maybe it's not because you're doing too little. Maybe you're doing too much, saying too much, thinking too loud. Sometimes the most powerful transformation begins when you just stop, when you allow silence to do what noise never could, heal, guide, and reveal. Stay with this. Stay through the stillness, because what's coming next isn't more noise. It's clarity, strength, and purpose. If you're ready to stop chasing, start aligning, then keep watching. There's something powerful waiting on the other side of silence. You've been conditioned to believe that constant movement means progress, that if you're not speaking up, pushing harder, or staying visible, you'll fall behind. But that belief is a lie. It's noise disguised as truth. Real progress doesn't always come from pushing. Sometimes it comes from pausing, from being still long enough to hear the direction your life is already trying to take you. When you stay silent, you begin to realize how much energy you've wasted chasing what was never meant for you. The world will always try to pull you in 1,000 directions. Expectations, comparisons, opinions, and if you're not careful, you'll get lost in the chaos, confusing other people's voices for your own. But silence strips all of that away. It brings you face to face with who you really are beneath the noise. And yes, that can be uncomfortable, because when you stop talking, when you stop trying to impress or explain, you're left with the truth, and the truth doesn't always flatter. It humbles, it confronts, but it also frees you. There's something powerful that happens when you choose not to react, when you resist the urge to prove your point or fix every misunderstanding. You start to reclaim your peace. You stop handing your power to people who don't deserve it. You begin to understand that not every battle is yours to fight. Some things resolve themselves when you simply refuse to feed them. That's not avoidance, that's self-mastery. Think about how much strength it takes to say nothing when your ego is screaming to be heard, to stay calm when everything around you demands a reaction. That's power, and that kind of power isn't loud. It's grounded, it's steady, it's unshakable. The world may never applaud your silence, but it will feel your presence. It will sense your certainty. It will respond to your energy, even if you never say a word. Every time you choose silence over chaos, you're building something deeper within yourself. You're training your mind to stay focused. You're building the discipline to observe instead of react. You're learning to trust that you don't need to force your path, because what's meant for you will find you when you're not busy chasing everything else. There's peace in knowing that life unfolds in its own time, and the less you interfere, the more naturally things fall into place. You don't have to announce your every move. You don't have to explain your silence. Let people misunderstand you. Let them question your quiet, because while they're watching and wondering, you're evolving. You're growing roots. You're aligning with something far more powerful than approval. You're stepping into the version of yourself that doesn't need permission to be still. Keep going. Keep quiet. What's real doesn't need to be shouted. What's coming doesn't need to be chased. Stay silent and watch everything begin to come to you. Your silence is not a void. It's a container. A space where everything you need begins to rise to the surface. Clarity, strength, intuition. But none of it can appear while you're filling every moment with noise. When you stay silent, you give your mind room to organize, to filter what matters and discard what doesn't. You stop reacting to life and start responding with intention. That's how you regain control, by letting go of the compulsion to always speak, always fix, always explain. Stillness sharpens awareness. In the silence you notice things, the tension in your body, the thoughts that repeat, the habits that no longer serve you. You become the observer. And when you observe without judgment, you begin to understand, not just others but yourself. You start to hear the deeper voice, the one beneath your fears, your doubts, your distractions. That voice isn't loud, but it's honest. It tells you when to move, it tells you when to stop. It doesn't rush, it doesn't panic, it knows. And the more time you spend in silence, the more you trust it. This is the space where transformation begins, quietly, internally, without needing to be seen, without needing to be validated. You stop living for the outside world and start aligning with what feels true on the inside. And once that alignment begins, everything else starts to shift. You feel lighter, more focused, more grounded. You no longer waste energy on things that drain you. You no longer chase what was never yours. Instead, you become a magnet for everything that matches your energy. You start attracting people who respect your peace, opportunities that feel aligned, moments that feel guided, not because you forced them to appear, but because you finally got out of your own way. This is the beauty of staying silent. You're not doing nothing. You're creating space for everything to come together naturally, with less friction, with less resistance, with more flow. That doesn't mean it's easy. Silence can feel lonely. It can bring up everything you've been avoiding. But the discomfort is the doorway. It's where the healing lives. And once you pass through it, you find strength that doesn't depend on anything or anyone. You become unshakable. Because your peace is no longer tied to outcomes. It's built within you. You don't need to be louder, you need to be clearer. And clarity only comes when the noise fades. So let it fade. Let the world keep rushing. You don't need to follow. You're not behind. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, learning to trust the silence, learning to trust yourself. The path will reveal itself when you stop demanding answers and start allowing truth to rise. Stay silent. Let your energy do the speaking. Let your presence do the work. Everything you've been searching for is already moving toward you. Quiet down and let it arrive. The mind is loud. It spins stories, replays the past, projects fears into the future. It wants control. It wants certainty. But silence interrupts that pattern. It invites the noise to settle and shows you that not every thought deserves your attention. Most of what fills your head isn't truth. It's conditioning. It's fear disguised as logic, doubt dressed as caution. And the only way to tell the difference is to stop feeding it with constant reaction. When you stay silent, you create distance between you and your thoughts. That distance is where clarity lives. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness beneath them. But you can't access that awareness if you're constantly talking over it. Silence isn't just about quieting the world around you. It's about quieting the war within. The war between who you really are and who you think you're supposed to be. Between what feels right and what you've been told is right. The moment you stop chasing approval, the moment you stop explaining your every move, is the moment you begin to come home to yourself. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need a perfect plan. What you need is presence, the ability to be here fully, without distraction, without resistance. Silence helps you get there. It pulls you out of the storm and anchors you in the now. And when you're anchored, you stop being pushed around by doubt, fear, and outside pressure. You become steady, clear, intentional. That's what makes you powerful. Not how much you know or how loud you are, but how still you can remain when everything around you is chaos. Stillness isn't weakness. It's discipline. It takes strength to stay quiet in a world that rewards noise. It takes courage to pause when others rush. But that pause gives you power. It puts you back in control. And from that place, you begin to see what actually matters, what deserves your energy, what aligns with your values, your truth, your vision. You start saying no without guilt. You start protecting your peace without apology. Not everything requires your voice. Not every moment demands your input. Sometimes, the most impactful thing you can do is stay silent and watch. Observe. Let things unfold without interference. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. That's how you gain wisdom most people miss because they're too busy trying to be heard. The real you doesn't need to scream. The real you doesn't need to argue for space. The real you simply is, calm, present, aware. And that version of you, that's the one that attracts what belongs. That's the one that makes aligned decisions. That's the one that lives with clarity and confidence. You don't need to add more. You need to strip away the noise and return to the silence that's always been there, waiting to guide you. Stay in it. Trust it. Let it become your power. Most people never realize how much of their life is spent reacting to opinions, reacting to fears, reacting to their own self-doubt. It becomes a cycle, automatic, unconscious, exhausting, and in that cycle, silence feels foreign, even threatening. Because silence asks you to stop, to pause, to feel. And when you stop, you come face to face with what you've been running from, the truth about what you want, who you are, and where you're really going. That confrontation is uncomfortable, but it's also necessary. Growth doesn't happen through noise. It happens in the quiet spaces where honesty finally has room to speak. You've been told to hustle, to grind, to make something happen. But no one talks about alignment, about how it feels to move when it feels right, not rushed, about how different life becomes when your actions come from clarity, not panic. Silence gives you that. It lets you breathe before the next decision. It gives you space to check in, to ask yourself, is this mine? Is this true for me? Is this who I want to be? And those questions are the gateway to a life that feels real, not just impressive. You don't need more validation. You need more connection to yourself. Because when you're connected, everything else becomes easier. Decisions feel lighter. Boundaries become clear. You stop needing to explain yourself to people who never really listened in the first place. You stop overthinking every move. You stop asking for permission. That's the power silence brings. It clears the static and brings you back to your own frequency. And once you're back there, nothing outside can shake you. There's a kind of quiet confidence that builds in silence. It's not ego. It's not performance. It's a knowing. A calm sense of direction that doesn't require noise to feel valid. That kind of confidence can't be taught. It's earned in solitude, in reflection, in those moments where you choose peace over chaos. It comes when you realize you don't need to be everything for everyone. You just need to be true to yourself, and everything that's meant for you will recognize that truth. Stillness is not absence, it's presence. It's being so fully in tune with yourself that you stop looking outward for answers. You stop chasing outcomes that don't match your values. You stop rushing toward things you're not even sure you want. Instead, you start trusting the timing of your life. You let what feels right guide you, not what looks impressive. And that's when everything changes. Not because you forced it, but because you finally aligned with it. If you've ever felt like you're missing something, like you're not where you're supposed to be, maybe it's not that you're behind. Maybe you've just been too loud to hear the call. Go quiet, let the noise fall away. There's wisdom in the stillness. There's power in the pause. And there's a version of you waiting in that silence, stronger, wiser, and finally free. Silence is a reset, a return, a reclaiming of all the energy you've scattered trying to be seen, understood, accepted. In the noise of life, it's easy to forget who you are. Easy to get lost in performing, pleasing, pretending. But when you go quiet, all of that starts to fall away. You begin to hear yourself again. Not the version shaped by pressure or fear, but the real one, the grounded one. The version that doesn't need to prove anything. That part of you has been waiting, patiently, beneath the surface. And silence is the doorway back to it. You don't need to become anything. You need to unlearn everything that convinced you weren't enough as you are. Most of what you think is missing isn't missing. It's buried. Buried under noise, buried under expectation, buried under the roles you've taken on just to survive. But survival isn't the goal anymore. Wholeness is, and wholeness requires quiet. It asks you to stop long enough to feel again, to listen, to sit with what's been ignored. That stillness isn't passive, it's intentional. It's the beginning of inner mastery. Every time you resist the urge to fill the silence, you strengthen your connection with yourself. You learn to stop reaching for distractions. You learn to stop numbing what wants to be healed. Silence holds a mirror. And in that mirror, you see both your wounds and your strength, and both are sacred. You don't have to run from either. You just have to stay long enough to understand them. That understanding turns into self-respect. It becomes your new foundation, steady, rooted, unshaken by the world's noise. When you stop needing to speak just to be heard, you start to value the power of your presence. You realize your energy speaks long before your words do. And when that energy is grounded in truth, it becomes magnetic. You no longer chase. You no longer beg. You no longer explain. You simply become. You become the calm in the storm, the steady in the chaos, the silence that speaks louder than anything else. People will notice the shift. They'll feel the difference in how you move, how you hold yourself, how you no longer react to things that once shook you. But this shift isn't about them. It's about you finally honoring your own rhythm. It's about reclaiming your time, your peace, your focus. It's about understanding that what's meant for you cannot be forced, and what's not meant for you cannot be kept. You don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight to be seen. Just be still, be clear, be you. The world will always try to distract you from your truth, but silence brings you back, again and again, until what once felt uncertain becomes obvious, until what once felt heavy becomes light, until you no longer chase life, because now, life begins to come to you, quiet, aligned, natural, exactly as it should. You don't rise by shouting louder. You rise by standing still in who you are. The louder the world becomes, the more power there is in your ability to remain centered, unmoved, and aware. In that stillness, you begin to feel the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is fast, emotional, driven by fear and ego. Response is calm, conscious, rooted in strength. And the only way to reach that level of inner control is through silence, by choosing not to meet chaos with more chaos, but with clarity and grounded presence. Every time you pause instead of react, you regain energy. You collect fragments of your power that were being wasted on conflict, over-explaining, pleasing, comparing. In silence, you learn how often you give away pieces of yourself for nothing in return. And once you see that, you stop. You stop leaking your energy into things that don't grow you. You start recognizing that peace is not something you find in the outside world. It's something you create within by guarding your space, your thoughts, your time. The moment you decide to stay quiet, you're no longer pulled into the noise of judgment, distraction, or doubt. You become the one who listens before reacting, who waits before moving, who trusts that stillness is not stagnation, it's preparation. That space you give yourself is not empty, it's fertile. It's where new strength begins to form. It's where vision becomes sharper. It's where you start to understand that real power doesn't rush. It doesn't perform. It doesn't panic. It knows. And the more you choose silence, the more you train yourself to stay above the noise. You're no longer controlled by urgency. You stop chasing answers from outside sources. You start turning inward, because now, you've learned to trust your own guidance. That trust becomes unshakable when it's built in quiet. Because in quiet, nothing is diluted. Nothing is distorted. You hear yourself fully, and what you hear becomes your compass. There is a deep kind of confidence that can't be faked. It comes from sitting with yourself long enough to know who you are, without needing the world to confirm it. It comes from resisting the impulse to always speak, always explain, always prove, not because you're unsure, but because you no longer need noise to feel worthy. You no longer need attention to feel valuable. You've met yourself in the silence, and what you found is enough. Now you move with purpose. You act with intent. You create without needing to be seen. You live from within, and that shift changes everything. Because now, your energy is no longer scattered. It's focused, aligned, powerful. And in that space, everything begins to move toward you. Not because you forced it, but because you finally became the kind of person who no longer needs to chase. You became still. You became certain. You became the calm that calls everything home. You were never meant to exhaust yourself proving your worth. You were meant to know it, live it, breathe it, without having to say a word. That knowing is not found in the noise of constant doing or the rush of external validation. It's found in silence, in the space where nothing is forced and everything becomes clear. In that quiet, you finally meet the version of you that has always been waiting, strong, focused, undistracted. You begin to understand that your presence alone holds weight, that your energy carries more truth than any explanation ever could. When you stop needing to be understood by everyone, you free yourself. You stop bending, shrinking, and performing for approval that was never yours to chase. Not everyone will understand your silence. Some will mistake it for weakness. Some will project their discomfort onto your peace. Let them. Their noise isn't your responsibility. What matters is that you stay rooted in your center, in your path, in your truth. Because the more you align with who you really are, the less noise you tolerate, the less chaos you invite, the more powerful your silence becomes. There's a discipline in not reacting, a wisdom in waiting, a strength in simply observing. Most people never develop that strength because they're too attached to control. They want answers now. They want reactions fast. But real power comes from restraint, from allowing space before decisions, from knowing that everything meant for you will find its way, without force, without desperation. You don't need to chase timing. You need to trust alignment. You don't need to control outcomes. You need to trust yourself enough to remain still when stillness is required. In silence, you learn patience. And patience is not waiting passively. It's trusting actively. Trusting that your growth is unfolding. Trusting that every moment of stillness is shaping you. You stop measuring progress by speed, and you start feeling it in your clarity, your peace, your emotional maturity. You stop looking for signs outside and start sensing them inside. You realize your intuition was always there. You were just too loud to hear it. But now, you listen. And what you hear is deeper than logic. It's direction. Let others be loud. Let them rush. Let them run. You don't need to follow. You're building something different, something solid, something real. And real doesn't need to scream. Real doesn't need to convince. It simply exists. And that's what makes it magnetic. You're becoming that. You're becoming the one who doesn't move for attention but attracts it through presence. You're becoming the one who doesn't speak to fill silence, but speaks only when words carry meaning. This is how you rise, quietly, steadily, unshaken, by trusting that silence is not empty. It's full of guidance, full of clarity, full of truth. And when you learn to sit with it, when you learn to embrace it, you become unstoppable. Not because the world sees you, but because you've finally seen yourself. There is a quiet power that comes from no longer needing to be understood. When you accept that your growth is personal, not performative, you begin to walk a different path, one where peace matters more than opinions. You no longer feel the urge to correct, to explain, to justify your every move. Instead, you choose your energy over your ego. You preserve your focus instead of scattering it across endless conversations that lead nowhere. In silence, you create space for depth, for truth, for decisions that align with who you are becoming, not who the world expects you to be. You realize that not everything deserves your reaction. Not every noise is worth responding to. There is freedom in not engaging, strength in holding your energy, peace in letting others misunderstand you without needing to fix it. The more you grow, the more you understand that silence isn't avoidance, it's elevation. It's choosing the high ground. It's saying, I see what's happening, I hear what's being said, and I still choose not to let it enter me. That's control, that's clarity. That's the discipline of someone who's done chasing closure in places that only bring chaos. You begin to see how much time you wasted trying to force clarity in places where confusion was the goal. How often you stayed where you weren't respected, just to explain yourself one more time. But that cycle ends when you go quiet, when you step back, when you realize that your silence is not a retreat, it's a return, to self, to alignment, to peace. You no longer waste energy trying to win arguments that never mattered. You conserve your fire for what truly deserves to be built. In the quiet, you start to rise differently. Not with noise, not with grand displays, but with inner stability. You become harder to shake. The storms come, but they no longer drown you. You don't flinch at criticism. You don't panic when things shift. You trust the process because you trust yourself. And that trust wasn't gifted, it was earned. In the moments no one saw. In the silence you didn't run from. In the discipline of choosing presence over performance. Your silence is not empty. It's full of wisdom, of listening, of watching, of learning. It sharpens your instincts. It aligns your path. And when you do speak, your words carry weight. Because they come from clarity, not from the need to fill space. You no longer react to prove anything. You respond only when something is worth your voice. That shift rewrites everything. You're no longer part of the noise. You've risen above it. This is how power grows. Quietly, patiently, with intention. You let go of needing to be heard all the time, and start becoming someone who's felt even in silence. You walk into rooms differently. You don't speak to take space. You already own it by how you carry yourself. And in that silence, everything begins to align. Not because you chased it, but because you became it. The moment you realize you don't have to respond to everything, you become powerful in a way most people will never understand. You stop being a slave to triggers. You stop being pulled into the emotional chaos of others. You begin to choose where your energy goes, and that choice rewires your entire life. It gives you a kind of freedom that noise can't offer. Because silence is not a void, it's a boundary. And boundaries are how you protect your peace, your focus, your evolution. In that silence, you stop chasing the need to be seen. You start building yourself in the shadows. quietly, intentionally. Every day becomes a refinement, a sharpening of who you are becoming. You no longer seek permission to grow. You grow in silence and let your life speak for itself. The results will echo louder than any words ever could. The alignment you create in solitude becomes the foundation for every decision, every relationship, every step forward. You stop asking what the world expects from you and start asking what your soul expects of you. That shift changes everything. When you stop speaking just to be heard, your words gain value. When you stop moving just to be seen, your presence gains gravity. The quietest ones often move the deepest because they aren't busy performing, they're busy becoming. While others chase attention, you build character. While others reach outward, you turn inward, not to hide but to rise, to center yourself, to clear away the noise so you can hear your own truth again. And as you evolve, you'll notice that silence becomes your filter. You no longer tolerate distractions disguised as opportunities. You no longer feel obligated to entertain drama, to explain yourself to closed minds, or to keep company with those who drain your spirit. You choose peace over popularity. You choose purpose over performance. Because now, you understand what actually matters. You understand that a quiet mind sees more, feels more, knows more. And with that understanding, you gain clarity that chaos will never offer. You begin to feel grounded, even when life feels uncertain. You stop reacting to every disruption and start responding from your higher self. You stop needing outcomes to feel stable because your stability now comes from within. That internal shift makes you powerful. Because you're no longer tossed by the waves, you've become the anchor. You've become the calm. You've become the person who doesn't need to shout, because your energy already speaks volumes. And that's the kind of strength that never fades. It doesn't rise and fall with circumstances. It doesn't depend on attention. It's not fragile. It's not loud. It's real. And the world starts to respond to that version of you in ways you never imagined. Opportunities align. Relationships deepen. Peace expands. Not because you forced it, but because you stopped chasing and started embodying. That's what silence does. It doesn't make you disappear. It makes you undeniable. There's a quiet shift that happens when you no longer seek to be impressive, when you no longer live to prove, to perform, to win validation that never really satisfies. You start becoming instead of chasing. You start aligning instead of reacting. You start holding your power in silence because you've realized the loudest person in the room often carries the least certainty. But you're done with noise. You've grown past it. Your peace has become your standard. Your energy has become your currency. You no longer trade it for temporary approval or shallow praise. You begin to understand that real growth is not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't crave recognition. It happens in moments of discipline, in small choices made without an audience, in the quiet consistency of someone who has chosen to rise with purpose. And when you live like that, something shifts in your presence. People feel it, not because you force them to, but because it's undeniable. You walk differently. You speak less, but your words cut deeper. You no longer need to take up space to matter. You are the space. Everything changes when you stop begging life to move and start trusting its rhythm. You begin to notice how many doors open when you stop knocking frantically and start standing confidently, because desperation blocks flow, noise drowns wisdom, and silence, that deliberate stillness, invites exactly what is meant for you. You don't need to hustle for alignment. You don't need to scream to be seen. What's meant for you will recognize your energy. It will gravitate toward you because you've done the inner work to hold it. Let others rush. Let them post, perform, and compete for things that don't last. You've chosen the deeper game. You've chosen to move in silence, build in solitude, and trust that the right timing respects the prepared soul. This is where your power multiplies, in the moments no one sees, in the self-control no one applauds, in the wisdom to keep building even when no results show yet, because you know it's coming. You know the silence isn't a pause, it's the preparation, and you are ready. You are not behind, you are not lost, you are not invisible, you are becoming. And becoming is often quiet. It happens beneath the surface. It's not glamorous, it's not instant, but it is real, and real growth always leads to real results. Stay with it, stay silent, stay grounded. While others burn out from chasing too hard, you will rise from within, steady, centered, unshaken. You don't need to force what's natural. You just need to stop interrupting it with doubt. Stay still long enough to let it unfold. Stay strong enough to hold your standard. Stay silent enough to hear the next right step. Everything you seek is already making its way to you. You just need to stay aligned, stay patient, and stay ready. Because when it arrives, it will feel effortless. Not because it was easy, but because you finally became the person who could receive it. There comes a point when you no longer need to explain your vision to people who don't see it. You stop shrinking to fit into conversations that lack depth. You stop watering yourself down to be more palatable to the ones who haven't done the inner work. Because you finally understand, clarity is not always loud, purpose is not always popular, and peace doesn't require permission. The silence you choose becomes a declaration: I know who I am, and I'm no longer wasting energy proving it. You begin to notice how powerful stillness really is, not the passive kind that hides from life, but the intentional kind that listens deeply, moves deliberately, and protects your focus like your future depends on it. Because it does. In a noisy world that thrives on distraction, choosing to stay silent is not weakness. It's strength, it's leadership. It's a quiet refusal to let chaos dictate your direction. When you hold your ground in silence, you rise above the need to react. You stop being pulled into the emotional storms of others. You become the calm in the center of your own life. And in that calm, something sacred happens. You begin to hear the deeper voice within, the one that isn't shaped by fear, comparison, or urgency. The one that isn't performing. It speaks with clarity. It leads with wisdom. It reminds you of who you were before the noise tried to make you forget. That voice grows stronger every time you choose stillness over struggle, every time you choose presence over panic, every time you stop chasing and start aligning. That's where your next level lives, not in more effort but in deeper embodiment. You're not here to beg life to notice you. You're here to become undeniable through your energy, your discipline, your unwavering inner standard, because people may overlook words, but they feel energy. And your energy is sharpened in silence. It becomes magnetic, grounded, unshakable. You stop needing to convince. You start becoming the evidence. The results speak, the alignment shows, the peace radiates, without a word. You realize that power doesn't always come from speaking. It often comes from knowing when not to. You stop explaining your boundaries and just live by them. You stop oversharing your plans and just execute them. You stop leaking energy into spaces that don't respect it. Because your path is sacred, your time is limited, and your silence is no longer empty. It's full of intention, growth, and unshakable self-respect. There is no greater flex than being at peace with your journey, no greater strength than choosing not to engage when your silence says everything. The ones who really move mountains rarely announce it. They simply become the force that cannot be stopped. You are that force. Keep your vision close, keep your discipline strong, and keep moving in silence. Everything meant for you is already unfolding behind the scenes. Trust it, breathe, and let it come. Most people never discover their true strength because they never sit with themselves long enough to uncover it. They keep moving, distracting, talking, chasing, afraid of what silence might reveal. But you are not most people. You are different. You've chosen the rare path, the path of depth over noise, presence over performance, truth over validation. And because of that, what's building within you is not fragile. It's not surface. It's not temporary. It's a foundation that cannot be shaken because it's rooted in who you really are, not who the world told you to be. When you stop outsourcing your identity to other people's opinions, you take your power back. You stop needing applause to feel worthy. You stop waiting to be chosen. You choose yourself. You choose stillness as your strategy, not because you're hiding, but because you understand that inner alignment is the beginning of every meaningful transformation. Silence becomes your space to realign, to process, to elevate. It becomes the sacred space where clarity forms and distractions dissolve. In the silence, you see more clearly what actually matters. You realize how much time you've wasted explaining yourself to people who never intended to understand. You recognize how many dreams were delayed by waiting for external approval. But that ends now. The version of you that is rising no longer asks for permission. It no longer seeks to be seen. It simply embodies. It becomes. It moves with quiet purpose. And that quiet becomes the most powerful sound in the room. Every time you choose not to react, you build emotional discipline. Every time you stay silent when your ego wants to prove something, you grow. Every time you let go of the need to control, you increase your trust in the process. And every time you center yourself in peace, you rise above the chaos that keeps others stuck. That's how power is built, not in shouting your worth, but in living it so fully that the world can't help but feel it. You are no longer available for anything that disturbs your peace. You've outgrown the habits that kept you chasing, the patterns that fed your insecurity, the noise that diluted your voice. Now, you move differently. You listen more than you speak. You observe more than you react. You respond from wisdom, not wounds. And because of that, your life begins to shape itself around your highest self, not your past self. That shift changes everything. Let others rush. Let them seek shortcuts. Let them burn out trying to be seen. You are on the timeless path, the one that builds strength in silence and mastery in patience. You don't need to shout about your journey. You just need to keep walking it with quiet conviction. You're not behind. You're not late. You're evolving. And this season of silence is not your weakness. It's your preparation, your elevation, your becoming. Keep going. Keep listening. Everything is already aligning in your favor. Silence teaches you what noise never could. It reveals how much of your life was spent reacting instead of responding, proving instead of believing, chasing instead of trusting. In silence, you become aware of how many decisions were made from fear, how many opportunities were missed because of doubt, how many moments were lost to overthinking. But that awareness is not regret, it's power. Because now, you're awake, you're present. You finally see that growth doesn't come from doing more, it comes from becoming more. And becoming more starts with stillness. When you no longer rush to speak, you give yourself time to understand. When you no longer crave validation, you start to live for truth. The noise that used to control you begins to fade, and what rises in its place is a strength so pure. It doesn't need to be loud to be real. It doesn't need to be seen to be solid. It simply is. And that's where you begin to feel the shift, not in your circumstances, but in your core. Not in what the world says about you, but in what you say to yourself when everything else goes quiet. This is where real confidence is built, not the surface kind that depends on praise, but the deep-rooted kind that comes from self-respect, from knowing that your peace is not for sale, your energy is not for waste, your mind is not a battlefield, it's a sanctuary. And when you protect that space, you create the mental clarity to move with purpose, no longer pulled in every direction, no longer drained by pointless distractions. You're focused now, you're grounded, and that grounding is what makes you unstoppable. Every time you choose silence, you interrupt the old patterns, the need to explain, the habit of overthinking, the impulse to defend your worth. You break the cycle that kept you small, and you step into a new reality, one where your energy speaks louder than your words, your actions speak clearer than your explanations, and your presence speaks louder than any noise around you. You start to realize, you don't have to force anything to happen, you just have to align with it. And alignment doesn't need attention, it needs consistency, it needs belief, it needs silence. There is a rare power in being at peace with your own process. While the world shouts for attention, you're becoming something real. While others seek quick wins, you're building a foundation that will last. While they search for shortcuts, you're mastering yourself. That is what sets you apart. Not how loud you are, but how still you remain. Not how fast you go, but how steady you stay. Let them underestimate you. Let them overlook you. It changes nothing. Because what's real will never need to rush, and what's meant for you will never miss you. Stay quiet, stay rooted, stay ready. You don't need to explain your vision to anyone who cannot see it. You don't need to argue your value with anyone who cannot feel it. Silence gives you the freedom to rise without distraction, to build without noise, and to grow without needing permission. When you're silent, you become untouchable. Not because nothing can reach you, but because nothing can shake you. You're no longer reacting to the world. You're responding to your own inner calling. That's where your power lives. Not in proving people wrong, but in proving yourself right, quietly, consistently, deliberately. Every day you remain silent in the face of chaos. You reinforce a message to yourself. I trust the process. I trust the timing. I trust my strength. You stop feeding your energy into things that don't deserve your attention. You stop explaining your boundaries and start enforcing them. You stop running from discomfort and start using it as a signal for growth. The world tells you to be louder, to do more, to fight harder. But silence shows you the opposite. It shows you that real strength is not shown by how much you say, but by how little you need to say. When you're calm in the storm, people notice. Not because you ask for attention, but because your peace becomes louder than their panic. Your presence becomes a mirror, reflecting back to them everything they've ignored within themselves. And that reflection may challenge them, it may confuse them, but it also inspires them. Because deep down, everyone is searching for what you've found, a solid place within. A foundation built not on noise, but on purpose, not on reaction, but on alignment, not on force, but on faith. The world may not understand your silence, but your soul does. And that's enough. Because your soul knows what it's building. It knows the work happening in the background, the decisions you're making, the discipline you're choosing, the battles you're winning that no one sees. That invisible growth is more valuable than any public praise. That private evolution is more powerful than any performance. You're becoming more than you were, even if no one is clapping yet. And that quiet progress is sacred. It's yours. You don't need to share it. You just need to keep going. Stay grounded in your purpose, not the pressure. Stay committed to your path, not the opinions. Let others chase the spotlight. You are chasing something eternal. Peace, presence, power. Not the kind that fades when people stop applauding, but the kind that remains even in the silence, especially in the silence. Because silence isn't empty, it's full of wisdom, full of healing, full of answers that only stillness can bring. Trust that. Let the world move how it wants. Let the noise rise. You don't need to match it. You just need to stay true to what's growing inside you. Quietly, patiently, powerfully. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing out. You are exactly where you need to be, learning exactly what you need to learn, becoming exactly who you were meant to become. Silence gives you the space to remember that. When everything around you feels urgent, loud, and overwhelming, silence reminds you that alignment matters more than speed. Growth isn't about rushing, it's about rooting. And roots don't scream while they grow. They go deep in stillness, beneath the surface, building strength where no one can see it, until one day, everything blooms all at once. This is your rooting season, a season that doesn't need noise or attention, a season that isn't glamorous, a season that may go unnoticed, but it's the most important season of your life, because this is when you build what the future version of you will stand on. The habits, the discipline, the self-respect, the emotional control, not for applause, not for approval, but for peace, for clarity, for purpose. And silence is the environment where all of that takes shape. You're not avoiding life by going silent. You're preparing to meet it fully, on your terms, with power and clarity. You don't need to broadcast every move. You don't need to defend every choice. You don't need to justify your growth to people who are still committed to their limitations. Their opinions don't define your reality. Their pace doesn't dictate your journey. Stay in your lane. Stay in your rhythm. The world is addicted to distractions, but you don't have to be. You are allowed to move in peace. You are allowed to take your time. You are allowed to grow in silence. Heal in silence, rise in silence. That doesn't make you invisible. That makes you unstoppable. Every time you choose to be still instead of reacting, you win. Every time you choose to hold your energy instead of wasting it on arguments, you grow. Every time you walk away from noise and choose peace, you expand. Silence is not a weakness. It is a weapon. It protects your focus. It sharpens your vision. It teaches you to be selective with your energy. Because not everything deserves your voice. Not everyone deserves your response. Your silence says what your words never could. I'm no longer available for anything that doesn't serve my purpose. This kind of power can't be faked. It can't be copied. It's earned. Earned through patience. Earned through discipline. Earned through the quiet decision to rise without needing validation. And once you taste that kind of power, you never go back. You stop chasing approval. You stop fearing rejection. You start living in truth. And that truth begins with stillness. So choose silence, not because you have nothing to say, but because what you're building speaks for itself. And when it's time, the world will feel it. But for now, breathe, stay grounded, and keep becoming. Quietly, boldly, unshakably. You don't need to shout to be powerful. You don't need to explain to be understood. You don't need to perform to be worthy. The real power comes when you no longer crave attention, when you no longer need the noise to feel alive. Because the more silent you become, the more you begin to hear the voice within, the one you've been drowning out with distractions, opinions, and fears that were never yours to carry. That voice is your compass. That voice is your truth. And when you finally listen, your whole life starts to shift, not because everything outside changes, but because you do. Stillness rewires the mind. It creates a gap between stimulus and response, and in that gap, you reclaim your power. You stop reacting from habit. You stop speaking from insecurity. You stop making decisions from fear. Silence creates space for clarity, and clarity is strength. When you see clearly, you choose wisely. When you choose wisely, you build momentum. And when you build momentum from a place of calm, nothing can shake you, not opinions, not setbacks, not doubt. Because you're no longer seeking direction from the noise. You've found it within. That's where everything begins to come naturally. You don't force a flower to bloom. You give it the right conditions, and it unfolds. The same is true for you. You are not behind. You are not too late. You are unfolding in perfect rhythm. You just have to trust it. But trust doesn't grow in chaos. It grows in stillness. When you step away from comparison, from pressure, from the need to prove yourself, you start to realize the universe moves in silence. The sun rises in silence. The seasons shift in silence. Growth, real growth, is always quiet at first. But it changes everything. Let others rush. Let others speak louder. Let others seek approval. You're building something different. You're building inner peace. You're building emotional resilience. You're building a life that aligns with your soul, not the world's noise. And to do that, you must stay grounded in your silence. Let the world question you. Let them misunderstand your quiet. That's not your burden. Your focus is sacred. Your energy is valuable. Your purpose is waiting for you to stop chasing and start listening. Listen deeply, not just to the world, but to yourself. Your instincts know. Your spirit knows. But they whisper, and you only hear them when everything else gets quiet. So let go of the urgency. Let go of the pressure to speak, to be seen, to be liked. You are not here to entertain. You are here to evolve. You are here to rise into your next level, and that level requires silence, patience, and trust. It requires fewer words and more presence, less noise, more knowing. Everything you seek is already moving toward you, but it won't arrive through force. It arrives through flow, and flow begins in silence. Stay still, stay strong, stay silent. Everything is already working in your favor. Let it come, let it unfold, let it be.